He did a lot of things that people have told us that we would be wiped off the face of the earth for. But we see David knew how to repent. David knew how to humble himself and get before the Lord and say, it is me, God. He didn't blame because my mom and them didn't treat me right. Because you allowed them to put me out the house and I lived in a field all by myself. I had no adult supervision. Because when you raising sheep, you doing the sheep. It may be other people that are helping him, or the people that could have instructed him, but mostly David was alone. Because you don't see in the scripture where it says that other people, and it's not to imply that it wasn't other people, but they don't denote those people. They talk about David. And David went in and out of the presence of the Lord. And David was raising up sheep. And we were taught that sheep are dumb animals. Because sheep only obey what their leader tells them to do. And so then we try to parallel our flock or our people to sheep. We try to compare them and we try to say, y'all don't know nothing unless me as your leader tells you something. And I was like, that's not the will of God. That's outside the will of God. Because the simple thing is, if he speaks to me, he's going to speak to you. When David was out in the field and fellowship with the Lord, his father said, David, I want you to go and I want you to take some food and some wine and some cheese, and I want you to go see about your brothers, make sure how they doing on the front line, because they were battling against the Philistines. Now, the Philistines was Goliath, them people, Goliath. And all of them were 6 feet or taller.
The giants?
Yeah.
Giants were about 8 to 10 feet.
8 to 10. They made us look like little.
They were towering, yeah. They were very intimidating.
They were intimidated by them. And Goliath was constantly tormenting them. And nobody could, every time a person would go up against Goliath, he would defeat them because he was so much bigger than them. He didn't even have to touch him. He just took his blade and swung it one time and then killed somebody. But David went, and David was smaller than his brothers. And David was good looking, but David was not in the stature of his brothers. He had been anointed king, but Saul didn't know that David was anointed king. And David went, and David was like, why y'all keep letting this fella talk all this trash to y'all? This guy got a big mouth. He's screaming and hollering. He's tormenting. Every time Goliath would say something, they were trembling in their boots. And so David said, hey, what will they give me if I go and defeat the giant? Now, people have already preached this sermon, but they never gave you insight in it. Whereas the men begin to tell David, David, if you go and you fight Goliath and you win the battle, you'll be able to marry Saul's daughter and you won't pay taxes.
And your family will be exempt from taxes.
And your whole family will be exempt from tax. You'll be taken care of forever by the royal family.
Mm-hmm. And see, it's the job of the king to fight, to be the champion for his people.
And so right then you see Saul had given up. Saul didn't even realize that he had allowed.
He was in fear.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's why the decree went out. The man that steps up to defeat Goliath, this is what will happen for him and his family and his house, and I'll make, this person will become part. He had to make the deal sweet so that someone will be willing to risk their life to do it. The difference between Saul and David is that David, in his years of exile, surrounded himself with men who were, well, not just wise, but they were warriors. Mm-hmm. He found him men that were faithful to him, not to the throne. So when he got the throne, those that were faithful to him went with him. Those were David's mighty men. Those same vagabonds, those outcasts, the people who were not the favored in society became his mighty men. And so Saul did not have this as a king. He did not have people that he could trust that would go out and kill a giant for him. And that was the difference between them as being kings.
But David kept saying, David asked the question. Saul told him, I'm going to let you marry my daughter. I'm going to let you marry my firstborn. Everybody always talks about Michal, but nobody never mentioned about Merab. Merab was his oldest daughter. And he promised David that you could marry my daughter, my oldest daughter. But because when he figured out that the people were going to follow David, because David came back from the slaughter, and the people began to sing out and they began to praise. They said, Saul killed his thousands, David kills his tens of thousands. So Saul got jealous because he felt like he possibly knew that the throne was never his.
Oh, no longer his.
No longer his. So he turned around and was like, oh, I'm going to get him. I'm going to get him. I want him to marry my daughter, and I'm going to set him up to get him killed. Because they bragging on the Philistines, but I don't want him no longer in my presence. I don't want him no longer to be around me. So I'm going to set him up to marry my daughter, and then I'm going to get him killed. Right. David said, I'll marry your daughter. But then when David went to go do the agreement with Saul married the daughter off to another man. He married her off to another man, and then he got mad because he was like, he can't be in my family now. And he learned that his daughter Michal loved David. Michal had been watching David, and she had fell in love with David. And so then he was like, I got a second chance. I'm going to let Michal marry him. And because if he's like us, he really didn't know David, but now every time Saul got into grief or anything, or his soul was vexed, who did he call? He called David, and David would play the harp for him, and it would calm down that demon that was in him. So he was like, he didn't have the wisdom to realize that David was wiser than what he thought he was. So he said, y'all go find out what David wants. And then whatever David wants, I'm going to set him up with the Philistines, and I'm going to let the Philistines kill him. Yeah. But little did he know what David had, what was in David's heart. And we're going to go to, we'll begin at the first verse. And it said, it came to pass when he had made an end of speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Now, a lot of people are trying to take this and make something different out of it, but it was two feathers that saw brotherhood. Mm-hmm. And Saul took him that day and would not let him go no more home to his father's house. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him and gave it to David and his garment, even to his sword and his bow and his girdle. And David went whithersoever Saul sent him and behaved himself wisely. And Saul set him over the men of war, and he was accepted in the sight of all people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. See, relationships, we in the body of Christ feel like sometimes we in relationships, or we carry on in the wrong relationships, and we don't realize, like sometimes we don't realize that my friend is really my enemy. And sometimes the one that I really think is my ace boon coon ain't my ace boon coon, or I am not buddy to somebody else. And then it says, when David and there are some people that you're going to meet in life and you instantly become brothers and sisters, or you become connected to one another, and no matter where you go in life, you always end up back surrounded with that person. And I've had relationships like that, and I love those type of relationships because it could be eons of time that we're apart from each other, but when we get back together, it's just like we never left one another. And I know for a shadow of a doubt that this person has my back, no matter what may happen, what may come. But this person always has my back. But then there are some that are sitting with you, and you think they got your back because they say, "Pastor, wherever you go, I go. Girlfriend, whatever you do, I do. Wherever you say, I go." And then the whole time they're secretly despising you. And because we try to use the word discernment as a gift, and it's not a gift, because it said discerning of spirits. And God give you that wisdom to know whether or not somebody is for you or against you. And you have to know. Sometimes I was taught the first thing that comes to your mind is always the right thing. But because of who we are, we'll try to reason it out and say, "Nah, that ain't it. That's my buddy." Just like when we as females date a man, and you got that thing and you don't know what knowing, that fool ain't my man. But we go like, I can make him into something different. And we try to hold on to it. But it's like, right here you're seeing that their spirits were knit together. They became brothers. To the point where when David had opportunity to kill Saul, he never would. He never would. He honored the position that Saul was in. Mm-hmm. But Saul was so hating on him because he saw that the people loved David, because David acted wisely. He acted with wisdom. He had knowledge of things. He knew, like he said, he was an outcast. He was thrown out at one time away from everybody, and he had to learn that you have to get along with people. It's some people that just some timing. Some people don't want to talk to people. Somebody, I don't want to be around nobody. I don't blah 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 blah. And you'll see this, and it's like, how can we have the love of Christ in us, and I don't like people? Sure. When Christ died for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And you're a ministry gift.
Yeah. And you're a fivefold ministry gift. But all are called. All of us are called to be a witness. To a certain degree. And it does not mean that you have to, be better than anybody or think you're better than anybody. But your thing is, you have to be what God called you to be. And you can't be above where you're at. So it's like, Saul, he was mad about it. Just like in ministry, you shouldn't get mad at somebody else's ministry flourishing. We should be rejoicing because God, this is their set time to be favored, and they're doing what God has called them to do. Now, you might be in the background waiting, and when God do bring you forth, it'll be accelerated growth so fast that your head will spin. But you have to rejoice on the ground level to make sure that you are doing what God called you to do. And it says, and it came to pass as they came when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistines, that the women came out of the cities of Israel singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tabrets, with joy, and with instruments of music. And the women answered one another as they played, and said, Saul has slain his 1,000, and David his 10,000. And Saul was very wroth, and the saying displeased him, and he said, They have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. And what can he have but more the kingdom? And it came to pass on the morrow that the evil spirit from God came upon Saul. And he prophesied in the midst of the house. And David played with his hand as at other times, and there was a javelin in Saul's hand. And Saul cast the javelin for he said, I will smite David, even to the wall with it. And David avoided out of his presence twice. And Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him and was departed from Saul. Now the Lord caused the evil spirit to come upon Saul because Saul knew the glory had left him. He knew he would do things and God would tell him not to do it, and Saul would do it anyway. David was a man after God's own heart, and David knew how to repent. David wrote Psalms 51, and he was like, in sin did my mother conceive me. And he was like, wash me, purge me, purify me, Lord. Give me a clean heart that I might worship you in spirit and in truth. Don't cast me from your presence, Lord. I need a broken and a contrite spirit. You said you won't despise those things. And so David knew how to get into the presence of the Lord and touch the Lord's heart. And when David began to woo the Lord was like, click, click, I give you the keys to the kingdom. He gave him the keys. David has a key to the kingdom. And his key is praise and worship. And learning how to get into the presence of the Lord, to get instruction on what to do and what to say and how to go about it. And you take that key and you unlock that door. And it said, any door that the Lord opens, no man can shut. And any door that the Lord shuts, no man can open. And therefore Saul removed him from him and made his captain over 1,000. And he went out and came before the people. And David behaved himself wisely in all his ways. And the Lord was with him. Wherefore, when Saul saw that he behaved himself very wisely, he was afraid of him. 16. But all of Israel and Judah loved David because he went out and came in before them. And Saul said to David, Behold, my elder daughter Miriam, her will I give to thee wife. Only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battle. For Saul said, Let not my hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistine be upon him. As I told you, he was getting ready. He was trying to set David up. He was trying to set David up. And a lot of people don't read the word. They read the word to try to, I guess sometimes disprove what God is saying, or disprove. They read the Bible as like it is a storybook. It's like a fictional book, and none of the stories in the Bible are real. And I was like, but these are historical facts of what has happened, because the Bible is real. Jesus lived, died, and rose again. And David knew the Lord so well that the Lord would protect him.